to chapter 11. We're starting the autonomic nervous system, and this is one of the divisions of the peripheral nervous system. And so we're going to start by reviewing where this system falls in terms of the entire nervous system. And so it's really going to be kind of a segue, kind of a branching point between chapter 9 that we ended off last unit at and chapter 11 that we're going to start this unit at. All right. So we'll start with an overview of the nervous system in general and really see where the autonomic division of that fits in. Alrighty. So in chapter 9, we spent a lot of time speaking about the central nervous system. Okay. So the central nervous system, which is pretty much brain and spinal cord. And we introduced the idea of the peripheral nervous system as well. So the peripheral nervous system is pretty much everything outside of brain and spinal cord. Okay. And so some of the structures that are involved or included or that communicate within the nervous system in the brain and spinal cord are going to be the pons and the medulla. All right, the way that we send signals from peripheral to central usually happens via the pons and the medulla, and we call these regions integrating centers because they bridge that gap, they bridge that communication. So we call these integrating centers, okay? And so on that basis, we can then speak about afferent signals. So signals that are coming from peripheral nervous system into our integrating centers, we call these signals or these types of neurons afferent or sensory neurons. Okay, these are usually going from sensory receptors and they're picking up information from the world around us. So sight, smell, auditory information, olfaction, all that information from the world around us, okay? And sending that to these integrating centers. We can then speak about efferent signals, okay? So signals that are moving in the opposite direction, basically instructions going from the pons and medulla, sometimes from our higher centers, if we make conscious decisions about these instructions, so from prefrontal cortex, but those messages still have to go through pons and medulla. So this goes from pons and medulla in the opposite direction out towards our effector tissue, which is also in the peripheral nervous system. Okay, and so this is going to be an efferent signal, or we can think about it as being on an efferent neuron. Now, this is where we get that division of the peripheral nervous system. So that effector tissue can be one of two types, right? There are two systems, two efferent systems that are involved in the peripheral nervous system, excuse me. So one is going to be the autonomic nervous system. That's what we're going to spend a lot of today speaking about or introducing. Oops. So the autonomic nervous system, which then has two further divisions that I'll talk about here in a second. And then we have the somatic nervous system, which we'll speak about later on in chapter 12. So the somatic nervous system. Okay. Main distinction between these two divisions of the peripheral nervous system is that the autonomic nervous system is involuntarily controlled. So involuntarily controlled. In other words, I cannot make conscious decisions about what my autonomic nervous system is doing, whereas my somatic nervous system is voluntarily controlled. Sorry, my writing is getting very small here, but voluntarily controlled, okay? Now, the tissues that are involved in the autonomic nervous system are also different. They're going to include cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and smooth muscle is pretty much everywhere in the body. It lines blood vessels, it lines internal organs, it lines the gastrointestinal system, it lines the bronchial tree, the airway, the bladder, all of that is smooth muscle. So that is, again, not under our voluntary control. We don't make decisions about smooth muscle, about glandular secretion and so on. We also have glands here and adipose tissue. Okay. The somatic nervous system only involves skeletal muscle. So these are the muscles that we can choose to move, right? Our biceps, triceps, muscles of the face, muscles of mastication to help you chew and eat and swallow. Any physical muscle that you can move, that you can make a decision about moving or not moving, is a skeletal muscle and hence is under our voluntary control, okay? Under the influence of the somatic nervous system. Let's also point out the divisions of the autonomic nervous system. We're going to get a lot more into the details of that going forward, but just to mention them here, we have the parasympathetic system. This is the area of our autonomic nervous system that governs rest and digest. So kind of the slowing down of body functions versus the sympathetic. We refer to this as the fight or flight. And this is going to be kind of the speeding up of those functions, right? Speeding up or increasing of body functions, okay? The last thing I'm going to put in here is something that we've spoken about already, which is the name of the junction. So the synaptic junction that allows for communication of autonomic signals is called the neuroeffector junction. And I've run out of space at the bottom, so I'm going to just put it off to the side here. But this is the neuroeffector junction. Oops. Whereas the synapse involved in the somatic nervous system is called the neuromuscular junction. Okay, so just to give a nice overview of how each of these divisions of the peripheral nervous system, so autonomic and somatic, have different functions in general. But then if you can look at the autonomic and even further divide that, that also has parasympathetic and sympathetic. And that's pretty much what we're going to focus on and speak on today, the divisions and the functions of the autonomic nervous system.